Hi class, it's Mr. Fiore. Today while I'm on retreat, you are going to listen to my voice as you take notes on the material in section 3. If you miss any notes during the presentation, you can watch this video on my website. Tomorrow when I am in class, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have on the material in this section. If you have not done so already, please take out your notebooks and turn to where we left off yesterday in our notes section. Now, so far in this chapter we've talked about many early battles that took place in the Northeast. In section 3 we're going to talk about how the American Revolution not only affected colonists in the Northeast but also colonists in the South and colonists that also lived in the West. Before we get into those areas where battles were fought, let us begin with how African Americans were affected in the American Revolution. Since the beginning, African Americans fought on both sides. Historians recorded that about 9 African Americans served on the colonist side at the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Enslaved people served as well, not just free African Americans. Some enslaved served for the British because the British would offer them freedom, for those who deserted the Continental Army, and that was an incentive for many enslaved African Americans because they didn't think they would ever get their freedom from the colonists if the colonists won the revolution. Many thousands are going to take the British up on their offer. However, some people who had formerly been enslaved that fought for the British are going to eventually serve on the American side. Washington at first refused to accept African American soldiers, but Washington decided to change his policy. He's going to change his mind, as you see up here in the notes. He's going to change his mind, and by the end of the war, there's going to be a total of 9,000 African Americans that are going to serve for the Continental Army. Of those 9,000, approximately 7,000 served in the infantry and 2,000 served in the Navy. African Americans served in northern militias and state armies. Most southern states, however, refused to accept African American soldiers. Slave owners feared that if they allowed African Americans to serve in their southern militias, then they would eventually be able to lead slave revolts. As a result of a number of African Americans fighting in the war, many northern states are going to start to take steps to end slavery. Pennsylvania, for example, in 1780 is going to take steps to end slavery. Alrighty, I'm going to leave this slide up for about another 10-15 seconds for those of you who are slow writers, and we will move along to the next slide. Okay, the war at home. Now, after the Americans' victory at Trenton and then at Saratoga, many more men in the colonists are going to start enlisting in the military, and you should have defined the word enlisted in your homework section. Enlisted, it basically means to sign up for military service. And during the American Revolution, you would serve a term for 1 year. A little different than today. If you joined the military today, you would serve a term of 2 or 4 years depending on what branch you go into and if you enlist or you become an officer and so forth. It was difficult for Washington to keep men enlisted in the Continental Army after 1 year. If you remember back before the Battle of Trenton, Thomas Paine wrote the Crisis to encourage support for the Army because so many men were going to leave. right, because of the harsh winter they faced just before the Battle of Trenton, and they felt as if the American Revolution may not have been, uh, would not be able, they would not be able to win the revolution. Civilians, right, that's an important term to understand, especially in the concept of war. Civilians are people that are not in the military, and even with the war going on in the colonies, many people that were not in the military are going to face hardships. They're going to often be subject to food shortages or military attack. Food shortages because the British may be blockading off ports, not allowing food to come in, and also because the wars were fought in the backyards of colonists or civilians' houses, and that was definitely something that was a hardship. Now, women's role during the American Revolution, I just want to highlight, all right, their role in society becomes very important. As men went to war, women are going to take over many of their husbands' responsibilities. On farms, women are going to plant crops, care for livestock, milk cows, grab eggs from the chicken coop. They're also in the towns, women are going to run their husbands' businesses. Some women, however, accompanied their husbands at the military camps. In battles, they would care for the wounded. Basically, they would serve as nurses. Now, some women wanted to take a very active role in the military. Two very important women that are known for their service in the American Revolution were Deborah Sampson and Molly Pitcher. First, we're going to talk about Deborah Sampson. Deborah Sampson joined the Army disguised as a man. Right? She disguised herself as a man because she wanted to fight for independence. When she was wounded in battle, supposedly she would tend to her own wounds so that she could keep her secret. She didn't want someone else tending to her wounds because then her disguise would be noticed. Now, another woman that played an important role in the American Revolution was Molly Pitcher, but that's really her nickname. Her actual name is Mary Ludwig Hayes Macaulay, also known sometimes, if you were to Google Mary Ludwig Hayes, it would come up as Molly Pitcher as well. Molly Pitcher is her nickname. The story behind Molly Pitcher is she was bringing water out to her husband, and her husband was wounded at the Battle of Monmouth. Mary Ludwig Hayes drops her water bucket, takes up her husband's cannon, and because of her heroic actions, she becomes a legendary American hero and becomes known as Molly Pitcher. This term, Molly Pitcher, becomes a nickname for all women that started to carry out water to troops during the American Revolution. All right, I'll leave the slide up for another 5 seconds and then we'll move on to the next one. All right. Also at the war at home, paying for the war was a very difficult task for Congress. The financial burden was put on them, and they had very limited resources. They did have some help from France, but they didn't have any power to tax because they weren't really an official government, and the Congress really is going to rely on the states for money. Now, I apologize. The slide is a little... this slide got a little messed up when I transitioned it from PowerPoint into the app that I'm using to make this presentation. Very important to know that wars cost money. All the resources, ships, troops, supplies, clothing, cost a lot of money, and the burden was put on Congress. The Continental Congress, that's what CC means, is going to look to the states to help pay for the war. But these states have very little money. So Continental Congress decides to print paper money called Continentals. Now, the problem is Congress is going to print so much money by the end of the war because they promise to pay soldiers that sign up for 1 year, then they sign up again, they promise to give them a raise, and they print so much money that by the end of the war, this section should be in this bullet right here. So you want to write this under where Continental Congress decides to print Continentals. The Continentals are worth nothing by the end of the war. Basically, paper money had lost almost all of its value. It's inflation. It can occur today too. If the government decides to print money at a very fast rate, faster than our economy and the amount of gold that is supposedly backing up our money, our money would not be worth much. You can see some examples of what Continentals are. You can see one up top here. You can see one down here, a $3 Continental. They can still be found. They still exist. They're in museums, but they're worth nothing.